Okay, folks, good evening and welcome to our podcast tonight with ex-Ranger, Everton, Marseille and England international Trevor Stephen. Trevor will be joining us from his home in Dubai, folks. How horrible must that be, waking up every morning in Dubai? We're over here, looking across at the Burj Khalifa and the Burj Al Arab, the sun splitting the trees, and we're here with snow, rain, you name it. Trevor will be on in a couple of minutes, folks. Folks, if you're on the Facebook page, please like and share. Obviously, the more people we get, the better. If you're on Twitter, hit the retweet button, please. A lot of podcasts coming up, folks. It's taken me a while to track Trevor down. Thankfully, to Mark Haitley, we've managed to get him. So hopefully, if I hit my magic button, the man from Dubai should be on. Hi, Trev.
Hi, mate. How are you? Hi, Gary.
Good. Good. Thanks very much for coming on, Trevor. You're a hard man to track down, but eventually I've got you for this podcast.
Yeah, I was hiding from you, Gary. I'd heard you were on my tail.
Is that right?
So, I've been incognito everywhere.
Yeah.
Anything to avoid you, mate.
Yeah, no problem, Trevor. But Trevor, obviously, before we start with your career, obviously the big talking at the minute in the world of football is the Super League. What is your thoughts on the Super League?
I think same as everybody else. It's out of the blue. It's drastic.
Okay.
It's detrimental, to the game in general, and it's selfish opportunism. And I think it's a betrayal, not only to the game and the fans, but it's also a betrayal at the level that these guys are operating at. The Premier League in England, for instance, you've got your 20 chairmen and owners, and basically 14 of those clubs have been lied to for quite a while, because this is not just overnight. So going forward, I can't see it happening. I think there's too much of a backlash on it from the fans, which is brilliant. And not just the fans, but everybody involved in football. Very, very few. In fact, no one I could quote you has come out in support of it. So I think it's dead in the water. But the damage that I think it's going to leave behind it is also going to be something that we're going to have to try and put to the back of our minds, because it was just so ill thought through, I think, and it's been almost a case of the opportunism of it, the pandemic and money not going through the clubs as usual, and no one has been able to avoid that. Everyone's been hit, but they have secured the future through this. They're securing the future for themselves as businesses, not only securing it, but adding tons and tons of cash into their cash flows. Right. So it's wrong. It's bad. It's terrible. It should not happen. And and there's breaking news on it all the time, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's just flashed up. Somebody has typed in that Chelsea have pulled out, but I don't know if that's somebody just saying that or if that's true.
Well,
Chelsea has pulled out.
I don't know. But you've got to just keep an eye on it every half an hour. But I just can't see it being sustainable. Not with this this negative sort of vibe for it from everybody in the game.
Yeah. Okay, Trevor. So, Trevor, your own career started out at Burnley as an apprentice at Burnley. So, if you want to tell us about how that come about.
Well, I think most Rangers fans are aware of where I come from. I come from the Scottish borders, just on the English side, at Berwick-upon-Tweed, and that was my hometown. I was brought up in an area, obviously, that's not rich in football or football talent. We do have the wee years, I suppose. I was too young for the 1967 episode, of course, but I was only 4-year-old then. But apart from that, it was a bit of a wilderness.
Yeah.
And but I had an older brother, and you kind of follow your older brother a little bit. You play with his group of friends, and I learned pretty quickly I was good with a ball, and that was noticed in school quite early. But in the town that I lived in Berwick, there was literally no one to play against. There was very little organised football. So I got myself to 12-year-old, and I was spotted by a famous scout actually called Peter Kirkley, sorry.
Okay.
Peter Kirkley, who ran Wallsend Boys Club. And I was on this trial in Newcastle. He asked me who I was with. I was with my school teacher, who was a bit of a mentor for me. You know, I think everybody in life needs a mentor somewhere along the line, whatever role that is. And this guy, Will Frenton, was mine. So I was invited to go to Burnley, and that's where the story started as a 12, 13-year-old.
Okay.
By the time I was 14, I'd signed schoolboy forms with Burnley. I was just, I was comfortable there. And listen, I was super excited, you know, being at a football club, for goodness sake, you know.
Yeah.
Coming from, you know, a small town with no track record of people breaking through into top level professional football. So it was just exciting for me, you know. And anyone who knows Burnley, it's a cotton mill town.
Yeah.
You know, with no great touristic attractions or anything. It is what it is, you know. It's a bit of a flat cap town, and but I loved it. It was like a metropolis to me, you know, coming from Berwick upon Tweed. You know, it was great. They had a snooker hall, and they had a cinema that worked, and they had, you know, traffic lights, you know, all of those things, you know, that are things that you sort of notice when you're growing up. So yeah, I went off to Burnley at 16.
Right. Okay.
And I was one of 10 apprentices. And of course, in those days, apprentices had to first and foremost do the menial tasks, which was like sweeping terraces and cleaning the boots of the players, doing the dressing rooms, painting walls, training every day in the mornings, but in the afternoons doing all the menial tasks. And that's what we did. You know, I pretty well earned my £17 a week back in the day, which was the standard apprentice fee, living in digs with other lads, and that was it. You know, but then you got to make your mark pretty quick. You don't have a long time in football. You've got to you've got to really sort of get going fast.
Yeah. But Trevor, could you see what you say about going back? And that's what a lot of the older players say about doing the menial tasks, cleaning the boots, sweeping the terraces. Yeah. Should them days be brought back? Because young kids nowadays, there's too much money involved.
Yeah, I don't mind there being money, but you know, with money, it doesn't have to just because you got money that you don't do the menial tasks. You know, you can do the menial tasks as well. So the money's not the issue. It's actually the fact that they don't expect to be doing these things.
Yeah.
And they were tough. They make you as a person or contribute towards rounding you as an individual. To understand that there is a grind to go through, and you've got to be mentally strong enough, not only to deal with that, to deal with leaving home, and to be competitive on the football field. So these are all challenges that were thrown in. Yeah. And so, you know, you didn't finish your working day till 4:30, 5 o'clock, and you'd been running and training hard in the morning, doing the tasks. And then, you know, doing everything else that the club asked you, but you were just happy to be there.
Yeah.
And it is something that I think's missing in the makeup of the youth of today, is that it comes a little bit too easy. That's not saying that the football side's easy, because it isn't. It's as hard as it ever was.
Yeah.
But I just think, you know, as an individual, as a person, it's a good thing for a young you know, guy to be exposed to these responsibilities.
Yeah, yeah. And then obviously from Burnley, Trevor, you've gone to Everton. Was that a hard Kendall signing? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. No, Burnley was good for me. I got into the first team in the first year, but only just right at the end of the season. I had 2 and a bit seasons. My first season, we won the league with Burnley, which is the third division. The second season, we got relegated, and then Everton came in to buy me. Okay. So I kind of went from this, and I was just 19 then, and I'd already experienced a promotion and a league championship and a relegation in my first 2 years, you know. And I played about 80 to 100 football matches by the time that I joined Everton at 19. So Howard Kendall bought me. He came to watch Burnley 2 or 3 times, or probably more. And we did quite well. Burnley got to the semi-final of a Milk Cup in that relegation season, which was the League Cup.
Yeah.
Liverpool beat us, but I did well against Liverpool. We did well against Tottenham as well in the previous round. I played in a game that Burnley went to White Hart Lane and beat Osvaldo Adiles and Hoddle and all of these guys, Alan Brazils and Garth Crooks, Steve Archibald. We beat them 4-1. So all of these things, and I'd played well in these games, had brought me to the attention of Howard, and Howard signed me for Everton, you know, as a 19-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, and that Everton team, obviously, that was a very successful Everton team, Trevor.
Yeah, it was. It was a brilliant team. It wasn't at the start, and personally, I felt a lot of pressure going there, just being relegated. Coming in as a reasonable signing, there was about £325,000 they paid for me then, which was 1983, and it was. I put a lot of pressure on myself because I was kind of expected to come and make a difference, but I was playing in a team that didn't have any confidence. My confidence must have been a little bit down as well, having just been relegated playing in a relegated team, which was Burnley. I found it difficult, but Howard Kendall's brilliance in management, he took me out of the first team, not out of the squad, but out of the first team, and told me that, you know, we're not doing well. The pressure's on you. It's too much. When you're ready, I'll put you back in. So I was disappointed. Obviously, I saw that as a setback and a failure.
Yeah.
But by the end of that first season, I played in the FA Cup final and we won the FA Cup, which was a springboard for 84-85 season, which was the best season in Everton's history. And obviously Gary Stevens was in that team with me, and that we had a great partnership, and obviously we were able to carry that on. When I signed for Rangers, but we played together a lot of times for Everton and successfully so. But it was a great experience, and we should have won the league the following year, but didn't. We signed Gary Lineker. Got rid of Andy Gray, sold Andy. We should have kept Andy. That was a big mistake. Gary Lineker came. We didn't win the league. We should have done. The following year, Gary left to the '86 World Cup. And we won the league again. And I was top scorer. This is how the game has changed. I was top scorer for Everton in that season. But I think I only scored 14 or 15 goals. And half of them were penalties. So it was one of those grinding out seasons. Yeah. But one of the key elements that was going on during my time at Everton was the lack of European football. Yeah. And because of that, the game in England was becoming less attractive. Howard Kendall left in '87. Gary Stevens left the year after. I saw up my contract with Everton, but I knew I had to get out. I knew I had to leave. And I was still, 25, 26, because I didn't see any progression. I saw, no European football as being a big hurdle, a big problem. And then Rangers, had started to build this. Everybody became aware of Rangers in the English game. Obviously, as a kid, I was aware of Rangers, but I was following Newcastle United, to be quite honest with you, back then, because although, my middle name's McGregor and I do have Scottish heritage, I was born in England with English parents, and we were kind of English orientated more than Scottish orientated. Yeah. So I was aware of, big clubs, Rangers and Celtic in Scotland, but it was that period when Graham Souness took over at Rangers that it became a serious option for top players. And of course, Terry Butcher, Chris Woods, Colin West. Colin West, right? I played from the Thumberland schoolboys were calling West when I was 14. Right?
Yeah.
You find this in football, right? You see what you see in the professional game, but a lot of us have met as kids, right, playing in representative football, and then you end up, names come back to you and people come back to you. And by the time I got towards my last season, which was 88-89, with Everton, I'd already been fully well tapped up by Graham Souness. Completely discreetly, not really. I remember they used a go between a guy called Bob Harris back in the day, and Bob's a retired journalist. And Bob was the guy who used to travel around with England as well as, comment and write match reports for English games. And Bob would be calling me just to say, just letting you know that Graham would like you to go to Ibrox. He's keeping an eye on you. He'd love you to go. And that was probably about 18 months before I went. And there was one night I was playing at Everton, and we did do a little sneaky one. After an evening game, I had to meet Graham and Walter. I think, and Walter be driving his big Jag down the M74, M6, and I had to meet them in a sort of side lane in Liverpool. It was all hush hush, cloak and dagger stuff. But I said to them that I'm definitely interested in coming. I can't say whether I would at that time. It was probably about 4 to 5 months before the season finished. But when the end of the season came, I decided end the contract, and I've got to make a decision. And the contenders, I kind of looked to go abroad. I definitely had to get out of England, although I did go and see Man United and Sir Alex Ferguson.
Okay.
I went to see him on the Monday, and on the Tuesday I drove up to Glasgow. Sir Alex was telling me the story about how he's building, but he hadn't won anything by that point. Yeah. And they were in England. We played in the same league, and we're going to play against Everton. I didn't want that. I didn't want to play against my old team, Yeah. And so, although I could have signed for Man United, I was excited about my drive north. And I met Graham, I had a look around Ibrox. And by the end of the meeting, and what was really cool, though, I have to say, when I went down Edmiston Drive for the very first time, because I'd never been to Rangers before. Yeah. I'd never been to Celtic. I'd never been to Rangers. But I'd watched a couple of away games of Berwick Rangers at Dunfermline once, I think, when I was about 12. That was about it. So when I arrived, David Murray and Graham Souness were on the front step of Ibrox waiting for me. And I thought that was super cool. Right? I thought that was meaningful. Whereas at Man U, I just went in through the secretary and someone passed me on the path to someone and eventually got to see Alex Ferguson. It was just a detail. Yeah. And I liked that. So anyway, to cut a long story short, decided that I was going to sign for Rangers, and I did so that afternoon. And Graham said, "We're not going to let you leave here without signing." Honestly, I said, "You're not leaving without signing." But I knew in my heart that one Rangers were going places, great ambition. They were probably the best payers in the UK at that time. I wouldn't say by very much, but Graham knew how the game worked. There had to be something else, And so there was a little bit of an add-on in salaries, but nothing to write home about. But it was coming back to the north. My parents could come, my family could come and watch me. Yeah. And a new experience and European football. And a lot of England players. I mean, and 45,000, I think it was in those days. Yeah. It was a great stadium. It's obviously brilliant now, but it was a great stadium as well, and the atmosphere was terrific. When I got to play my first game, the first game was amazing. Yeah. The first game was amazing.
Yeah, but there's a question here for you, and it's from Greg Morrison. Says, Trevor, with Gary Stevens already been at Rangers, did that influence your decision to join Rangers?
Yeah, definitely. It was. I don't think we actually spoke about it. I was in and out the England squads in those days, and I think Gary was as well. So we didn't really get to meet very much. But no, I really enjoyed playing with Gary at Everton. I knew his strengths, and we knew each other extremely well. And to go up and play with him again, it's great when you walk into the dressing room and you've got familiar faces. There's no settling in period, really.
Yeah.
You don't need that. But to link up with him again was brilliant, because Gary was he was underestimated in his ability on the ball. He had plenty of ability on the ball. Occasionally, he would be a bit rash with his crossing, but his athleticism, his defensive play as a right back was second to none, and it allowed me to play my game as well. And so it worked. Yeah. So to answer the question, Gary was one of the reasons, not the only reason.
Yeah. So we have another question from there from James Reid. He says, Trevor, who was your best friend at Rangers? Best teammate, that'll be?
Mark Haley. Me and Mark are good mates. And we were roommates. Me and Gary were roommates for a bit, but then me and Mark were roommates for the majority of the time. And we're still very close to this day, and stay in touch.
Yeah.
And we went to the '86 World Cup together as well, and Gary was there too. Gary and I were roommates for England.
Yeah.
But I just got on with Mark extremely well. We had a great laugh. And I admired him as a player. I admired him as his personality and character. He wasn't loud. So he wasn't one of the more loud guys in there. But everybody respected Mark, and there was no messing about with him. Just a great lad, right?
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest. I'm I'm always under the piano in any scuffles, but Mark would be there to protect me.
Right. Question from Gary Patton. Trevor, you played for both Rangers and Marseille. What's your opinion on Rangers getting put out by Marseille in the Champions League?
Well, it's, I played at Marseille obviously the previous year.
Yeah.
I mean, how long have we got on this podcast? Honestly, it was. I mean, that story's massive, right? But to answer the question, I definitely had my worst game for Rangers at the Marseille home game, right? Ever. For the 3 days that leading up to that game, it rained, and the pitch was a quagmire, really.
Horrendous, yeah.
And I was playing against Eric Dimeco, and Eric was a tough opponent. I played with him the previous year, although he wasn't in the team the previous year at Marseille. Manuel Amoros was in the team, but in training he was like bang, right? He would kick you into lumps, and he'd get right in your face very, very quickly. And he was in my face all that game, and the ball wouldn't move out of the mud. So anyway, the game for me was rubbish. But Gary Swiggin came on and scored a brilliant goal, and Mark's goal. The away match, we could have won that. We definitely could have won that. But in the overall picture, there is that cloud about Marseille, isn't it? About the ongoing or the ongoings off the field. Yeah. Now, it was a very peculiar club. It wasn't a big club like Rangers is a big club. It was a kind of a big club because one city, Marseille, it just only had one team. Yeah. Right. So you can imagine the passion of those fans, and I think we saw it in those games. But the club itself was a bit tin pot in many ways. But they had a huge ego as a president, Bernard Tapie, and he was win at all costs. And I don't know any details of what went on, but they were proven to be, untrustworthy. And they're relegated, but they managed to hang on to that European Cup. I mean, that season was so close to being just out of this world, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so here's a random one for you, Trevor. Obviously, Adrian Mulvena, you played with Andy Gorm. Gorm or McGregor, who do you think is the best?
I think Andy's better by a fraction. I think Andy was better by a fraction. But I think they're similar in many ways. You know, they're more 6-yard box goalkeepers than they are shot stopping is, I think, the strength of both of them. I think you've got to congratulate Alan McGregor for his longevity. I think football's tough, and I don't think people kind of recognise it at times, because they do see the monetary side of it sometimes, and that clouds the effort and the focus, the concentration, the competitiveness, not only on match day but during the week, and to keep standards. And goalkeeping's a funny old position, isn't it? It's so different from what we do as run around players. But no, I'd give it to Andy. I think Andy was just a top quality goalkeeper, and brave as you get as well, and a brilliant character. I don't know Alan very well. I think I met Alan maybe 2 or 3 times, but all very briefly. But I've got to stick by my teammate on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Question from Wolf Marshall. Evening, Trevor. Thanks for your time as a Ranger. What was the highlight of your time at Ibrox?
The highlight was probably scoring the championship winning goal in the first season at Dundee United. That would be the standalone one, and I think quite comfortably. I obviously loved scoring against Celtic on the 1st of January 1993. I only scored one. I had a goal disallowed against Celtic as well, which was a genuine goal. I think it might have been that season as well, and that was at Ibrox. But I enjoyed that header past Paddy Bonner. And to score the winning goal, right? For all Rangers fans, I'm sure they would love to swap places with me on New Year's Day, right? And I'd only been asked to play up front very last minute. I think Coisty pulled a muscle in the warm up, and Walter sort of hooked me over towards the dressing rooms at 10 to 3, to the showers rather, and he asked me if I'd play up front because Coisty's just pulled a muscle. So I said yes to everything, by the way. honestly, anyway, what killed me off in football towards the end of my career, someone invented wing backs, and Walter said, "Would you mind playing wing back? Because you give me the best at it that we've got." And I said, "Yeah." And honestly, it killed me doing 100-yard dashes, all the game when you got no one behind you and no one in front of you. Tough. So what was the question? What was the best goal?
No, what was the highlight of your time at Ibrox?
It was obviously scoring that goal. This is a personal thing, but winning titles and winning trophies is great. But I tell you what was brilliant as well, was the first time that I played at Ibrox, and that summer's day against Tottenham, and they had Lineker and Gascoigne, and obviously Maurice Johnson made his debut, and of course the signing of Maurice made it easier for me, right? It made it easier for me because I could just slither on in there, and no great fanfare. So, but my mum and dad were at that game, and they were in the director's box. And we were playing, and you want to get one over the English teams. When you're playing for Rangers, you really want to send a message. And I scored the goal that won it. And for me, that was a brilliant start. My parents were there. I think my brother and his wife were there, and it was a good start, a brilliant start, and it gave it a bit of a flavour to the fans
Yeah.
at Ibrox, what I'm capable of, so that was good. And then we got beat against St Mirren the weekend after, didn't we?
But Trevor, you talked earlier about obviously scoring against Celtic. You playing in Old Firm games. How did the Old Firm atmosphere compare to the Merseyside derby? You've obviously played in a few of them.
Yeah, it's completely different. You know, the Old Firm derby is just a different experience to anything that
Yeah.
I've experienced. When I started, Blackburn Rovers against Burnley was a ferocious derby. Then I stepped up to Liverpool and Everton, ferocious derby. But at the time I was playing, families were split between Reds and Blues.
Yeah.
It's become a little bit more aggressive and divided. Particularly following the Heysel,
Yeah.
disaster. But Rangers and Celtic was just beyond explanation. The noise deafening to a point of almost insanity. I don't remember any of the games being great football games. The fans might do, but I don't. I remember them as being hard fought, scrapping for everything. Celtic were generally always in the game.
Yeah.
Occasionally they would beat us, but we had the upper hand on them. But they were always tough games, and they had some good players. Paul McStay was a good player,
Yeah.
and John Collins was a good player. But from the fans' point of view, the ferociousness was there, and
Yeah.
you could feel it. I remember playing at Ibrox, not playing at the first game at Parkhead after I joined. I think Celtic had gone ahead early in the game, and it was when they had the old jungle.
Yeah.
And I remember the ball going out on the right-hand side, and I was playing wide right, and the ball went towards this ball boy who let it go through his legs and let it rest against the fence of the jungle. Right? The lad wasn't going to get the ball. He said, just left it alone. So I had to go and get the ball, retrieve the ball. And, welcome to the Old Firm at that point. I mean, that was horrible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, both sets of fans are equally responsible for whatever that is on that day. But, I was just glad that we came out on top most of the time.
Yeah.
Winning the 9 in a row that Rangers achieved and being part of that was terrific. And I finished at the end of that 9 in a row. I was hardly playing any games by that point with injuries, but I just stopped at the end there. I wasn't going to try and play anymore. It was a good place for me to end it all.
Yeah. Okay. Question from Rick Russell, Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
Who were your toughest midfield opponents during your time up in Scotland? And was the quality better or worse than you anticipated?
If you look at the quality, first and foremost, I think, the quality I thought of the Scottish Premier League back then was very good. It was probably, I would say, difficult to judge, right? Difficult to judge. But I'll tell you what it was. Every game was a battle.
Yeah.
A lot of the teams had current international players. Okay, from whatever country, you look at Hillhouse from Aberdeen and Snelders, and the Celtic team had internationals. Hibs and Hearts had international footballers.
Yeah.
So the standard, listen, to be quite frank with you, the standard was better than today's Scottish Premier League, without a doubt. What I wasn't shocked by it. What I was shocked by that every game was an absolute cup final, because playing against Rangers was a massive challenge to everybody and anybody for whatever reason they chose. It was massive, and also playing for Rangers. If you lose a game, it's a crisis, and we felt that. We didn't expect to lose any games. but we knew we had to battle to gain the right to play, and we had better players, on the whole. As far as the best player, I think Paul McStay was probably the best Scottish footballer at that time in Scotland. John Collins was close to him. I mean, Paul McStay, again, somebody I knew from the age of 14 when I was playing for Northumberland schoolboys. He was playing for Lanarkshire schoolboys.
Yeah.
And then the Scottish under-15s team, I was playing for the England under-15s team. So we clashed again. So I knew of his pedigree, and he was a through and through Celtic man, and played for his team. Quality footballer, no doubt about it, and he could have played in England. There was any shadow of a doubt. That would be who I would pick out as probably being the best player.
Yeah. A question from Adrian Mulvena. Trevor, what's your thoughts on the job Stephen Gerrard is doing?
Oh, come on. Oh, really? Oh, man. Oh, I'm telling you, what a job. What a job he's done.
Yeah.
Not only just doing the job, but knowing that he had it was like an egg timer. He only had so much time to do this in.
Yeah.
And to do it in the fashion that he's done it, and the progression that he's made. And he was learning on the job. And a different environment, and a league, and a town, a city that he wasn't familiar with, just shows the professionalism of him as a person, never mind as a footballer or as a manager. And he's obviously done brilliantly having Gary McAllister next to him, the staff around him, the recruitment staff have been brilliant. But for me, it's in the dressing, on the training pitch, the dressing room, the pitch itself, Ibrox, and every ground across Scotland, is to raise your standard to the point of you will not be beaten. Yeah. Right, and that took a while for Stephen to get that. And I remember. Do you remember the Legends game that was played? The Liverpool Legends and Rangers Legends.
Yeah.
In fact, it was just before that. I was a guest in the hospitality, and I tell a lie. I was a guest at the hospitality lounges at Rangers Celtic, and Stephen had said to me in a little meeting that we'd had prior to the Rangers Celtic game that I think we're just about ready. Right? And this was a season before this.
Yeah.
He says I've just about got them convinced not to be intimidated by playing against Celtic. All right. And that day, Rangers were poor. So everything he'd been working on and building towards didn't do it.
Yeah.
And Celtic won the game. Obviously disappointment. But I just felt and knew that he was going in the right direction with this group of players, and just had a bad day at the office that day.
Yeah.
So it was something I could feel that day. He was definitely getting there. But the pressure on this season, my goodness, is, I know a lot of people in the Rangers Supporters Club and who are Rangers fans out here in Dubai and then the Middle East, and they were panicking, man. I wasn't in Glasgow, wasn't on the streets of Glasgow, I wasn't seeing it on a daily basis. But there was panic in the air. The 10 in a row could never happen. And it didn't happen. And, again, going back to the reason for this answer, Stephen has been unbelievable, incredible. The players want to play for him. They want to walk, run through brick walls for him. He doesn't suffer fools, but he's also very close to his players, which we saw particularly in the aftermath of winning the Championship, the Premiership, Scottish Premier League, rather. So my hat's off to him you'll never understand what he's done.
Yeah.
I don't think you can ever understand what he's done for the Rangers family and
Yeah.
in leading the team forward.
Yeah.
I mean, terrific job, and I hope he goes, for 2 or 3 more years at least.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that he will, at least see out his contract, and Rangers build again, because from what I see, Rangers looks like a really exciting place to be at the moment, and
Yeah.
it looks like it's going the right way on all fronts.
Yeah. Brilliant. Another question from Rick Russell. Trevor, how would you rate the 92-93 side against the 85 European Cup winners, Cup and League One side you
Yeah,
played for in Everton?
I've never been asked that. I think, even in that period, football changes in style a little bit, but probably not that much. I would say I would sorry to say I would go with that Everton team by a nose. By a nose. The reason we didn't win the treble in England that year was because of we played in the Cup Winners' Cup final on the Wednesday night,
Yeah.
and then we played in the FA Cup final on the Saturday. We didn't get back into Liverpool till the Thursday, and drove to London on the Friday, and then went straight on the pitch. And Man U had more energy than us, and pipped us with Norman Whiteside scoring. I say this is a question that's never come up to me before. But the team that I was playing in at Everton suited me brilliantly. Had terrific players in brilliant partnerships,
Yeah.
And I reckon you could say that as well about the 92-93 team. What we had at Everton was obviously a fantastic goalkeeper, the world's best at the time, in Neville Southall. Then our centre backs, which was Ratcliffe and Mountfield, was a brilliant partnership. On the
Yeah.
right, there was myself and Gary Stevens, which was a partnership. On the left, it was Psycho Pat Vandenhouw, and Kevin Sheedy. And then you had Graham Sharp and Andy Gray, or Adrian Heath, whoever it was, that partnership up there. And in the middle, Peter Reid and Paul Bracewell.
Yeah.
And it was like telepathic in the end, right? Powerful, strong. There were a lot of similarities, by the way, because that team was tough. They could fight and bite and mix it. The 92-93 team could do that as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to separate them, but I think where I was in my career as well, I was coming through and developing very, very quickly. It meant a lot to me, that particular team. So
Yeah.
I would go with that, but I hope nobody holds me to that in a bad way.
Obviously, Trevor, we've got to talk about 2 World Cups.
Yeah.
Obviously, you played in the 86 when the Maradona handed the ball.
Yeah.
Terry Butcher was on here a few weeks ago doing a podcast, and Terry's still very devastated and bitter about the handball.
Yeah, it's that happens in football. I tell you what, it wouldn't happen now if you got the VAR, but I'd rather be without it. That VAR seems to be killing the game, if you ask me. Listen, I was thrilled to go to a World Cup. I think any player wants to play for their country, and on top of that, the icing on the cake is go to the World Cup, because that's what I grew up with. I grew up with the image of Pelé in the 1970 World Cup and the Gordon Banks save. That was one of my childhood memories, and I'd played for England. Schoolboys, under 18s, under 21s, and then got straight into the England team. But to play against, to get to that World Cup and then to play against Maradona, that was just a kind of an out of body experience almost, to be in the Azteca Stadium, 120,000, playing against Argentina. And again, it was fueled by the Falklands War, which had happened a few years before. So there was an extra dimension to that game. But Maradona, was just better than everybody else, and by a margin, and we're talking at top international level. He was that good. You couldn't get near him.
Yeah.
As he demonstrated in his second goal. But, you know, he did cheat. And, history could have been rewritten. Not to say that we would have won the World Cup if we'd have gone through, but we had a decent chance. I think in tournaments, it's always a sign of a team that's got a chance is when they improve going through, and England did that.
Yeah.
And the team changed. So I didn't start in the team, but I got into the team eventually and played 3 games, one against Poland, Paraguay, and Argentina.
Yeah. So obviously 86, and then you played at the 90 World Cup, Trevor. The famous when Gaza had the tears.
Yeah.
Special player, played in England, also played with him at Rangers as well.
Yeah. Paul was again. I played against him, at club level when he was at Newcastle United, and then at Tottenham. But the World Cup was that was a dream World Cup. Mexico was a dream World Cup. But the 1990, when Serie A in Italian football was the best place to play football, and the World Cup was sensational. To be there, started in Sardinia, didn't start well. I wasn't in the team again at the start, but then I kind of weaseled my way in again. So I got to play against Cameroon. Yeah, but I came on as a sub. I think I came on as a sub for Terry Butcher. I think in that one, not sure. But I did well when I came on, and just to play in the World Cup, I find it difficult to put into words. That to me, getting to the World Cup was the pinnacle. That when I got to play for England, just get me to a World Cup, and I was lucky to do it twice. But to play in the semi-final, again, I came on for Terry after about 60 minutes of the game, and we were 1-0 down. Andy Braham had scored this goal, came off Paul Parker's back. We played in the Sao Paulo and Napoli. No, we didn't. We played in Turin. We played in the Juventus Stadium in Turin. Yeah. And the game changed when I came on. It had nothing to do with me, to be quite honest with you. But we got to go back. Gary Lineker scores. And the game goes to extra time. And I felt I contributed well in that game as well. Gaza was fearless, right? This was the beauty of Gaza. He was fearless. A young lad brought into the England squad. He wasn't even sure about getting to the England squad until England played Czechoslovakia in the April prior to the 1990 World Cup. And he scored 2 unbelievable goals, and he had to go. He had to be picked. He's the kind of sort of the genius player, the sort of the Grealish, back of the day, right? But he didn't go like as a wallflower. He went as the managing director of that squad. It was madness. I spent the first week that we were in training in Sardinia preparing for that group stage. Our wives and girlfriends were invited over. And at the time, my wife was pregnant, so she didn't travel. Steve Hodge was the other one with us, with me in Gaza, basically, who didn't have a wife or girlfriend. Steve Hodge couldn't get a girlfriend because he was a bit nerdy, right, a bit geeky, and Gaza was frightened of women, right? So he didn't have a girlfriend to bring over either. So the 3 of us spent a week together, basically train in the morning and spend the afternoons together. And God, he drove us mad. mad to the point that Steve Hodge would get on a pedalo and pedal out to the sea so Gaza couldn't bother him, take his book out. It was constant. It was fun with Gaza, though. And he was brilliant as a footballer. And to play with him at Rangers, was brilliant. I didn't play with him that much, but The one thing about Gaza, the day that we won the league against Aberdeen at Ibrox, and he scores the hat-trick.
Yeah.
Fact is, no one else on that pitch could score 3 goals in that game, in the intensity of the game, the heat of the day, and just have the natural ability to go and do it. I mean, we had players of natural ability. I consider myself a player of natural ability, but Gaza's genius level. And there's an element, of course, to the genius of being individualistic. And Gaza was individualistic to a point, but he could also lift the team. And Brian Laudrup was very similar. Gifted footballers. But yeah, it was a thrill to be with Gaza, because I tell you, when he joined Rangers, the whole world turned and looked at Rangers. Yeah, I know he'd had a tough time in Italy, but again, Rangers were, right on the map as far as world football was concerned.
Yeah, a good question here. So, playing in Scotland didn't appear to hinder your international career, but were you surprised at how few opportunities both Mark Hateley and Mark Walters were given whilst up here, despite playing arguably the best football of their careers?
Yeah, but to be honest as well, I suffered a little bit from that, because in '89 when I arrived, I wasn't in the squad regularly. David Rocastle had just got in. So it was between myself and David Rocastle. Although I went to the tournaments, and then so after the '88 European Championship, David got in. He came through for Arsenal. And when I joined Rangers, I wasn't getting into the squad either. So I managed to play well enough towards the end of that season and get into a squad. And I played well when I met up with England. And because Bobby Robson picked me ahead of David Rocastle, because I'd already been to a World Cup. And I had a different style. And he knew that I had the experience. And David was young and not quite ready for it.
Yeah.
And he's sadly no longer with us, of course, David Rocastle. What he was a great player he was. Yeah, as far as Mark Hateley is concerned, Mark, when I got into the England team, was a staple part of the diet of an England team. And Mark scored the goal at Windsor Park in my England debut. Yeah. Which was the 1-0 win in the World Cup qualifier. It did, I think, when the management changed, Terry Venables came along into the and Glenn Hoddle to a point. Came along. I think Mark had moved on by then. I can't remember how it went, but I knew Terry Venables came up to watch us a couple of times, and but we didn't get the nod. And Mark was playing some great football at that period, particularly 92, 93. Yeah. 91, 92, 93. I thought he was terrific. Yeah, that's how it goes. Sometimes, out of there's always been that sort of, I wouldn't say it was arrogant, but an ignorance about, Scottish football in Scotland and in footballing terms, and this is why I think, Steven Gerrard coming up to Rangers was such a magnificent move by the board. Yeah. And he's delivered, big time. And it really feels to me that people are taking notice again. And which is a great, not only winning the league title, but putting us back on the map, which is great. Yeah, brilliant.
One last question now, Trevor, and it's from Scott Smith. He says, do you think Rangers could fit Patterson and Tavernier in the same 11?
I'll be honest with you. I'd be guessing, because I'm not seeing so much of Patterson, to be quite honest, because I don't get to see every Rangers game. Yeah. But I just like to comment more on Tavernier, right? Because I've really admired him for a long time, but I wasn't sure if he was going to be strong enough to to fulfil what he could do, or he would move from Rangers too early.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm delighted that he stayed and he's been captain and he's led from the front. But you get talented players, right? And they should be able to play together. And I found that in my career. Steven Gerrard will pick a team that works. And because at the end of the day, no matter what, no matter how you play, the fans still want to win inside. And that's the important thing that I think that is the fundamental. It's still a crisis to lose a game at Rangers, and it always will be. It always will be.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, Trevor, thank you very much. I know it's...
my pleasure.
It
my
must be
pleasure.
11 or 12. Is it midnight in Dubai now?
It's 3 hours. 3 hours ahead.
3 hours. 3 hours. Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, Trevor. Yeah, Trevor. If you could just stay there a minute, and I'll take you off. I want to speak to you then. Okay.
Yeah, by all means. Okay.
Thanks, Trevor. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers, man.
Thank you. Okay, folks. There you have it. Trevor Stephen, brilliant podcast. Some good questions and talk well about Rangers, folks. Few more podcasts coming up in the next couple of weeks, folks. Obviously, watch the Facebook page. You will see who'll be coming up, and hopefully a few more Rangers players. And that's it, folks. I'll speak to you later. Good night.